Welcome everyone to Rock M Radio. This is the beginning of a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. It is season 8. I don't know that we're keeping track of episodes or anything like that, but you probably just watched me talk to Matt Klein, Missouri men's basketball coach, and now we have another guest. So both Matts have the week off, and so it's just me, Sam Snelling, here to talk to you about Mizzou college basketball in general. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see me here. Please take a moment to hit the like button below. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so we can kind of help this channel grow a bit. If you're listening to us on the podcast, make sure you're subscribed and go ahead and hop on over to whatever podcast app you're using, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and leave us a review. 5 stars is better than anything else. And we'll just kind of hop in as the world turns in college basketball. I'm pretty excited about our next guest. I don't think anybody in college basketball doesn't know the name Ken Pom. He is essentially the guy who brought college basketball analytics to the forefront. We use all kinds of analytics sites at Rock M Nation. We use stuff that we do ourselves. We use Bart Torvik, we use Evan Mia, we use Haslam. Pretty much if there's an analytics site out there, we're using it, Synergy, all that kind of stuff. But the man who kind of started the craze is Ken Pom. And so we're going to talk to Ken about sort of the state of college basketball analytics and its impact, on college basketball. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Ken Pom. And I'd like to welcome to the podcast an old friend of the pod, if I can say that a little liberally. He's considered the godfather of college basketball analytics, which is a space that has grown exponentially over the years. And yet when any sort of analytics are talked about on television, it's always this man's website that they're typically talking about, even if they sometimes forget to mention his name. You can find his college basketball ratings at kenpom.com, his blogging on Substack at substack.com @kenpom. He still occasionally types things in the old Twitter machine at Ken Pom there as well. Please welcome to the podcast, Ken Pom. Ken, how are you?
I'm doing great, Sam. Thanks for the thoughtful introduction. Happy to be on again.
Well, I'm thrilled that you agreed to come back on, especially this time of year. I'm sure there's a lot of things going on, for anybody that's trying to put together analytics, us included at Rock M Nation. We have our own kind of preseason projections coming out. But I think there's a lot of really interesting topics that we can kind of hop into. And the one thing that I really kind of wanted to get your impressions on, specifically, I think everybody in college basketball looks forward to, the Ken Pom update dropping, whatever. I think you've said in the past something along the lines of, you like to kind of drop it on a big news night. So it just sort of slips in there. And it is always something that we look forward to, but college basketball is wildly different now than it was even just a couple of years ago. I think we talked to you the last time, I want to say it was 2020 or 2021, something like that. So the transfer portal was just starting to get revved up, and now we're full on portal season almost all year round. Do all the transfers make it better for your algorithm as far as when you're trying to lay out those preseason ratings?
Yeah, it's a complicated answer. So in one sense they do, in that there are more known players on rosters. So in the case of Missouri, there's you guys got a lot of transfers coming in this year. But that means there's fewer JUCO guys that are going to have an influence, or fewer freshmen. The rotation is going to be made up mostly of guys that have a Division I track record, if not entirely of those guys. Mm-hmm. So that actually is useful. The problem is that, obviously when I first started doing this 20 years ago, I designed an algorithm that, ignored transfers completely. So I had to, kind of redesign things over the years, and mostly patchwork mode for a while. And then last year I really overhauled the ratings completely and went to town on being, a lot better at valuing transfers. And I do have an upcoming, very dense piece on the Substack that will detail the success that really the preseason ratings had last year. In past years, I was just kind of beholden to like how it's like a correlation, right, from year to year for how good teams are, right? Like for the most part, it's pretty high. Like if a team was good last year, they're probably gonna be good this year. And so the accuracy of my ratings was basically just like dependent on that. Some years it'd be good, some years it'd be bad, but it was always dependent on like kind of the correlation from year to year. Last couple of years, that correlation has gone down, understandably, with all the player movement. And so you would think my preseason ratings would get worse, but last year, because I kind of overhauled everything and really made it more transfer specific, actually the accuracy improved while the correlation went down. So it was actually kind of a nice win for the preseason ratings, which is a really long-winded way of saying that I've kind of overcome all the issues of not all of them, but a lot of the issues of handling transfers.
Yeah, as much as maybe can be overcome. Well, and to sort of like piggyback on that a little bit, I think it's because Evan Mia wrote a really nice blog post about sort of like building a modern team in the transfer portal era, and he talked about you do want to be able to import new players, but you don't want to overdo it because like that can kind of throw out the balance. You still want continuity, and I think about like a good example last year is like the University of Arkansas, who most preseason ratings had very high. Obviously, it didn't go very well for Eric Musselman's last season, and so like, is there part of it there that like, is there like a balance that you're seeing, like a correlation with like an over reliance on transfers versus versus still kind of needing to I guess keep that continuity alive?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I read Evan's piece and I, mostly agree with it. Like, yeah, you can't, it's very difficult to like completely overhaul your roster and have success. This year, I believe there are 8 teams that returned 0 minutes from last year. And that might be like, there might be some walk-ons on those teams. Like there actually might be some minutes, but basically like, rotation players, right? There might be, I think there's 8 teams that do not return any rotation players from last year, which if you look at like, the entirety of like 2006, when I first started doing this, to like, 2018, there weren't, 8 teams total in that period. Right. So, so we're seeing more teams have to do this kind of by necessity. But it's obviously not optimal. And I do think the optimal approach is continuity within your program. But you can't force that. If the players in your program are not very good, you don't necessarily want to keep them all. If you're really concerned about winning games. So yeah, it does seem like a mix. If you're returning your key guys and supplementing your rotation with 2 or 3 key transfers, that's probably the most healthy approach in terms of just trying to get wins.
Well, and then kind of talking about coaches, because a couple of those rosters that you referenced are really directly impacted by John Calipari's move in the offseason. And basically the question that I want to ask is in like projecting like Arkansas, and this isn't an Arkansas pod, but it is I think interesting to me because it is analytically driven, in that you're taking a coach who is very successful at one school and you're importing him into another school. And he's also taking with him a significant portion of the players who are going to play next season for that school he was at. And now you have essentially what would have been the 2024-25 Kentucky Wildcats, and it's basically the 2024-25 Arkansas Razorbacks. So, how do the analytics sort of look at a move like that, and how much of an impact does a coach's history and their success sort of play into where they maybe end up in the rankings?
Right. So the coaching thing is kind of TBD. I've never explicitly included coaching track record in the preseason ratings. The only thing I have done is like if you have a new coach, like there's a flag for having a new coach, and within that there's a flag for having a new coach with Division I experience and not Division I experience. But over time, as I've the one thing about going to more of a player-based model is that some of those factors really start to become less important. because you're measuring like specific player strength now. So even though my model is not a complete player model, like you might see with Evan Maya, it is more of a player model than it used to be. And so the coaching issue is less, but I have experimented with this. Like part of my, complete overhaul last year is I looked at including, coaching track record, and it is useful. It's just hard to implement it correctly. So I might yet implement it this year. I mean, I only have, a couple of weeks to figure that out. But I have, the code's just sitting there. And so I just got to be more comfortable, I guess, with the implementation. That said, it doesn't really help someone like John Calipari. The coaching track record thing is like measuring it against like what the preseason ratings would do without the coach, right? Like if you just assume every coach is the same. And Calipari's never really like overachieved his preseason ratings, probably the opposite on balance. So in that case, it's probably not going to help Arkansas. It might help, Kentucky to some extent. Kentucky probably on balance a weaker roster than Arkansas right now, but maybe you have a little, the computer probably have a little more faith in the head coach because Mark Pope has traditionally overperformed his preseason rating. So, there would be an adjustment there, but as of our taping right now, Sam, there's no serious influence of coaching track record.
Well, so I asked that because one of the things that we've done in our preseason ratings is I actually went back and polled, trying to. One of the things that I've always done is try to build a depth chart for each team in the SEC. And it used to be basically me just saying, all right, like these guys look like the 5 best players. They're the starters. Here's the second team. Here's the leftovers. But one of the things that we're trying to accomplish here, and I looked at basically the coaching history for how they use their roster. And we tried to basically apply that to slotting players based upon the number of minutes that we expect them to play. And one of the things that, as far as I'm aware of, that's never been publicly available on kenpom.com, is these sort of like player projections and where they are. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to do. And it's really hard,
Yes.
Without going back and just amassing, a massive amount of data. It is difficult. But I feel like it does give us at least a hope for a baseline on, what kind of, at the very least, what kind of offensive team, if a guy is going to need to play 70 minutes versus the season before, where he was an okay offensive player and playing 40% of the minutes and how that sort of impacts what the projections end up becoming.
Yes. So what's your question?
Oh yeah. So that was, that was essentially, I don't know if there was an entire question out of that, but it was, trying to figure out, exactly what, maybe your algorithm already does is, do it in a way that, gives us a little bit more of a stacking order. Like, is that something that your algorithm does?
It doesn't. It would be great to have some sort of player rating and minutes projection and all of that stuff. I suspect just frankly comparing how my preseason ratings did to like other preseason ratings last year, it did really well. So to go through all the trouble to do that, there would be certainly additional insight, which would be great. Yeah. It just probably wouldn't make my preseason ratings that much better. So that's the reluctance. I have undertaken such efforts and, never quite gotten to the finish line. It is, it's just college basketball is just, so vast. There's so many teams that play at such different levels that just managing that data is a challenge that, I've had difficulty overcoming, let's just say. But the ratings themselves don't work exactly that way. They do look at like player performance, and there is sort of a de facto, I guess, projection in there, but it's just not specifically projecting, hey, this guy's going to take these minutes or whatever. It's just like, this guy's returning. This is what he did in his minutes. Like, are his minutes valuable? If so, the team gets more of a boost, and if not, they don't. And same thing for the players who leave. The best example is probably like South Carolina last year, where like Gigi Jackson leaves and his minutes were not very valuable. And the algorithm didn't really care that he left and kind of reverted South Carolina to more of an average SEC team. And that ended up working out pretty well. Like they don't always work out that well, obviously. Once you're Arkansas, and I mean, there's always surprises, which is what makes the game great. But that gives you hopefully a little bit of insight into how the ratings work.
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting, and certainly I know how traditionally from the start of the year to the end of the year, like how well your projections do. It's interesting to me that that it relies less on individual player data. It's almost as if like the historical performance has a heavier weight for a program. Which is another thing that I think we all kind of liked about the program program rating, overall program rating that you released a few years back.
Yeah. So, and just to be clear, like, the program track record has some weight. It has less weight than it used to, again, because it's like a little, things are a little more granulated looking at kind of player data. There's just not like specific player projections I can pull out of the system. So, but you can come up with a pretty good rating just looking at a team track record, but more and more with all the player movement, you do have to kind of account for who's coming back and the quality of those minutes, basically.
Yeah. So bit of a pivot here, because I think a major sort of topic, especially around the the NCAA tournament last year, was this sort of concept, and we don't really know exactly what like the NCAA's net rating is, but it seems to be wildly close to what your ratings are.
Yeah.
And like there was a lot of talk last year about certain teams, particularly teams in the Big 12, being able to trick the algorithms. And like, Iowa State in particular kind of caught some heat for essentially like lining up a bunch of like, bad teams in their non-conference schedule and just beating the snot out of them. So when people talk about that, like, this is, clearly as the guy who writes the algorithm, like how does that sort of make you feel? Like what do you want to say in response to anyone who sort of feels that there are teams out there that are able to trick the algorithm?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's harder to trick the algorithm than people think. Like, but it also depends on which algorithm. Like, I will say, like, a lot of times people put a lot of heat on me for this. Like, oh, it's garbage time and all these points still matter, and the points do still matter. But the more you outscore a team, the less the points matter. But I would just encourage people on like days where they think a team is gaming the system to look at the other rating systems out there and see how much those teams jump compared to mine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely not the worst offender. We'll just say that. But that said, I am concerned about this. Like, obviously, when I first started doing this, nobody cared about what I was doing, and now people are starting to like play to the algorithm, which is not ideal. And I do want to change things, and I seriously have plans to do that. I'm not able to do that for this season. I haven't gotten things into a good spot, but there is work ongoing that will further minimize, at least in my ratings, the effect of runaway scoring margin, and really sort of train the model more on the team's chance of winning, like beating an opponent, as opposed to like scoring margin. Like right now it's trained on scoring margin, and you can kind of infer a chance of winning from it, if that makes sense. So if we know like team A is favored by 10 points over team B, like we can infer their chance of winning based on that. But in the future, the plan is to have a system where team A is, has a 90% chance of beating team B, and we can back out that they would be a 10-point favorite in that situation. And that'll lead to like less effect of running up the score. However, the sad truth is that like running up the score is still a good predictor. Like if we have two common opponents and one team wins by 20 and the other team wins by 30, like there's some information there that's useful.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that the one team is 10 points better than the other team, but they probably are better than the other team just based on that information. So that's the hard part, is that, scoring margin still matters a lot. But I will confess, like there is definitely concern. I mean, the concern like hit hit like the sweet spot for me when you had the Michigan-Wisconsin game where, Juwan Howard is, trading blows with coaches on the other team. And I mean, it was essentially because like he was fighting for a tournament berth and he was pressing when the game was over and he wanted to increase the scoring margin. Right. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't think I was like directly responsible for that, but I think I was indirectly responsible for that. So, we don't want that kind of thing going on. And ultimately it's like, I don't know what the plans for the net are, but I'm surprised that like they don't work really hard to like limit the effect of those types of things, because obviously it's become an issue in the last 5 to 10 years.
Well, I do think like there's some speaking, like you're saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that team is 10 points better, but it probably speaks to that team has maybe better depth. Like I think a lot of, Missouri fans will remember, Mizzou's tournament run 2 years ago. And, that team caught a fair amount of flack because their garbage time efficiency was pretty poor. And so they would be up 35, 38 points on one of these sub 300, Division I opponents. And the final score would end up being 22. And so, like that level of inefficiency in your garbage time, negatively affected, a team like Missouri, who was really good in its top, maybe 7, but the problem is a lot of those garbage time minutes are going to guys who are like 9, 10, 11, 12, and, sometimes walk-ons and that can kind of negatively impact, your efficiency rating.
Yeah. I mean, I would also say like, even if those garbage time minutes are not going to those guys and they're going to 1 through 5, like it's hard to turn a 35-point lead into a 40-point lead, mm-hmm. I mean, I've never coached, but it's just that, the players are just less motivated in that situation. They're not going to dive on the floor for loose balls and risk, banging their knee or something when the game is over. So that's the issue too. But I agree with the world that certainly garbage time performance should be minimized and, or if not outright ignored. Although, really, if you're trying to predict, again, my goal is to try to predict scores. I'm not trying to like predict like who's going to make a tournament or anything. I'm trying to like make predictions on scores. That's all I care about. So that garbage time information actually does matter, but certainly in games where you're playing the 310th ranked team, it really shouldn't matter that much.
Yeah. While we're kind of, bagging on the net, another kind of common complaint that a lot of us have is sort of the arbitrary quad system, where you have these hard coded numbers where a road game win against team that's ranked 30th versus the team that's ranked 31st is going to result in a very different ranking in your quad wins. So, if we were to sort of sit down and work at, like building a better quad system, like, would you stick with the quad system? Would you toss it out completely? Would you have some sort of like sliding scale? What do you think is like the right way to approach, how you would kind of rate what kind of win was what kind of win?
Yeah, well, Sam, I mean, if you're familiar with my work, you probably know that I'm pretty much in favor of getting rid of the selection committee itself.
I am aware of that. Yes.
Removing humans from this process. I mean, there might be some role for, a couple humans in some sense, but certainly we need a more objective process. And right now it's pretty subjective. And the quad system is just the evidence of that, right? Like it's extremely hard for humans to manage all this information for, I mean, you have 68 teams or whatever you have to seed, and then there's another, 20 to 30 at any point in the last probably month and a half of the season that you're considering for the tournament. So it's like 100 teams you're balancing all this information for, and it's it's just not realistic to think that any humans could do that job well. So step one, get rid of the humans. Step two, the quad system falls away in that case because the quad system is just designed to make the human's job simpler. And we don't need to simplify this. We can just use something like, the wins above bubble system or a strength of record system, which just values your wins and losses against the schedule that you played and creates a ranking from 1 to, this year 364. And you take the, top at-large teams that aren't already qualified, and that's it. And it would be an amazing system because we could, we could track this all year long. You would know going into the last week or two of the season who's in, who's out, and you could inform the public on, hey, if this team wins, they're going to gain X amount of points or whatever, and they'll be in. And it would be just amazing drama that we should adopt. But in that case, the quad system would go away. I do want to add though, like the point you bring up about the quad system, like, hey, you beat, a team, you beat number 30 at home and they drop to number 31 and you don't get a quad one win. And that's really silly. But I will say I did look at this like last year in the off season, because I really wanted to prove that was like a big deal. And it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. Like it seems like the committee is like pretty decent at properly evaluating the quality of wins. So like it knows the difference, like they know the difference between a really good quad one win and a borderline quad one win, right? And they know there's not much difference between a borderline quad one win and a really good quad two win. Like they're obviously not perfect. And I just spent the last 5 minutes, explaining why I would like to get rid of them. But in that situation, it's maybe not quite as bad as certainly I would have assumed.
Well, and I had Rocco Miller on the pod. I guess that was a little over a month ago. And one of the things that he was talking about is, that like the committee is really kind of, pretty good at essentially like discarding anything that happens in quad 4 unless there's a loss there, or multiple losses there. And then that's going to weigh heavier on your roster, which is one of the reasons why, I think, when people sort of refer to analytics, they talk about, if this is going to, like we're just going to take, 1 through, 36 of, the Ken Pom ratings, and that's going to be our at-larges. Versus actually what you were referencing, which I'm a big believer in, is, because the results do matter.
Yeah.
And, there's plenty of teams out there that have the opportunity to play a lot of good teams. They do play them close. They don't beat them. And so like their efficiency metrics stay really good, but they don't have that strength of record. They don't have the wins above bubble, which are two, really valid ways to sort of measure the quality of an NCAA tournament team.
Right. And so even so this is where the committee falls well short is dealing with those games that are not quad one, right? Like you're, a team that doesn't get those opportunities to play specifically like easy quad one games, right? Like most of your teams outside of the power leagues, when they play a quad one game, it's on the road, and it's hard to get those like borderline quad one opportunities. So, they end up going into their league. They play a lot of quad 3 and quad 4 games. And like quad 4 in particular, if you just look at like the toughest games in quad 4, like they look pretty easy. But if you play 20 of those, like a bubble team is going to, like, we know, like, one thing analytics has helped us with is we really know like how likely a bubble team is to beat those teams. And, if it's a 90% chance of winning, you play 20 games, like even if you're a bubble quality team, you're going to lose 2 of those games. Right. So, the committee just disqualifies those teams that play 20, quad 3 and quad 4 games and loses 2 or 3 of them. But the reality is some of those teams deserve, a second look because, racking up a lot of wins against mediocre competition is actually really hard for your typical bubble team to do.
But so like a good example of that might be like Indiana State of last year, who a lot of people, thought should have been included. Their overall schedule strength was one of the things that held them back, and they did lose some games. But as college basketball people, like we know that it's tough to win on the road. And the NBC is a quality league, and so for a team like that, to basically miss out because there's a wide difference between I think like quad 4 is like all the way up to like 160 or something like that. Like it's really absurd to like include the 160th team, with Mississippi Valley State or Incarnate Word, like these schools who are typically in like the bottom 10, and to compare those as basically the same team based upon the quad system.
Yeah, the Missouri Valley is probably the best example of that, where just those road games in league are never going to be quad one, and a lot of them are not quad two, but it's just very difficult to win all those games, even if you're a bubble quality team. If you stuck a mid-level power league team in there, like they would lose some of those games. And yeah, it was kind of also always a big deal for like the middle of the pack, like, or not the middle of the pack, like, the third or fourth best team in like the West Coast Conference, right? They have to play Gonzaga, who's like a plus, quad one, and St. Mary's. And then the other teams in their league are like, all right. But they're all, quad twos on the road, quad threes at home, and some quad fours in there. And it's like, you're going to lose some of those games. And then when you lose some of those games, the committee just basically dismisses you. And so, yeah, those are the ones that really, I think, are not treated fairly by the committee.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So we are kind of at the back end of this. I do want to talk about your human poll project. Last year was the first year you ran it, correct?
Correct. Yep.
What did the human poll? First, maybe for our listeners, you could kind of describe the idea behind it, what you're looking to accomplish with it, and what were the results?
Yeah. So the human poll is basically just a way for humans to kind of vote on, preseason poll, but it's different than the AP poll in that we rank all the teams in college basketball. And obviously that would be like not feasible. It would not be feasible for a human to fill out a ballot from 1 to 364. So we give them 50 kind of randomly selected matchups, and they're all designed to be competitive. So you have to think about them. But they're basically just one-on-one matchups, so, you get Duke and Kansas and pick who you think is going to be better at the end of the year. And by better, I mean better in my ratings. So something sort of like objective truth here. And you get 50 of those matchups. And so it's kind of a contest. If you're the person who does the best in this contest, I will last year we didn't do this, but this year I will make a trophy and send it to you. So there's some bragging rights and a reward. And if you finish in the top 10, you get a free year of Ken Pom, which isn't as good as a trophy, but it's something. But the other side of it is that we'll use everybody's picks. Like right now we have 12,000 picks already that people have made. So we use all those picks as like de facto games, and we kind of create a power rating based on that. And it creates a very intuitive ranking from 1 to 364. So it's the only human-based 1 to 364 ranking that will be out there. And it's pretty accurate. Like the method basically, like I feel like is superior than just creating like the AP creating a 1 to 25.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to put your feet to the fire and say, hey, if you think, Iowa State is third or whatever, if I match them up with another really good team, like now you're kind of like, well, are they really going to finish ahead of, Kansas and Ken Pom at the end of the year? You got to kind of, think about that, knowing there's something on the line. I think it just should create a better ranking than that way.
Well, and I found it to be pretty challenging, mostly because and I would imagine this may be the case, and you can tell me that I'm full of it or that it is true. That as you go down the list of schools, like as people you get into the teams that they're maybe less familiar with, that the range of picks maybe become less accurate. Is that the case?
Yeah. So the way the poll set up is that it's designed to give you more picks, at the top of the poll. So like, I'm not too concerned about who's in the bottom 50. We do want a ranking. We want a ranking of those teams, but those teams show up in your ballot like 20% of the time compared to like the teams in the top 50. So anyway, in analyzing this last year, one of the things I found was actually that the rankings at the bottom end of the poll actually weren't that bad. Like they were, the accuracy was pretty consistent throughout the poll. So So that was encouraging. We also found that the poll, did add some value, like my preseason ratings. So my preseason ratings are better than the poll itself, but the poll did add some value. And so, just between us, Sam, I might be like including it a little bit here. I don't want to make that too public because I don't want people to screw it. But so far, based on the data we've gotten, like the ranking, really makes sense. And so, there are teams. I haven't finished my preseason poll yet, but there are teams in my preseason poll that kind of feel like outliers relative to the public. And sure enough, like the human poll is kind of like correcting for that. So it should add some value to my preseason ratings as well.
How long of a process is it for you to sort of, come up with the, sort of full set of rankings? Is it easier like with some of the, the more well-known teams, and then just kind of becomes, more of a slog as you get, down the list a little bit? Or
are you talking about my personal ratings? Like my algorithm? Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's just an algorithm. So it's like, it's spitting out all the teams at once. So I'm not like going in there and fudging it. I guess when I say I'm still working on it, it's more working on the algorithm, right? Like going back, is there any information that I'm missing? Obviously with more transfers another year, a lot of transfers last year, there's just more information to calibrate on from that respect. And so it's just working on things like that, maybe adding the coaching influence, trying to figure out how to do that. So it's the work involved is not working on, hey, do I slot this team here or whatever? It's working on the algorithm itself. And then the ranking of teams just falls out from that.
Nice. Well, so that's all we've got for you. I was hoping to kind of keep it right around 30 minutes, and it looks like we're just a little bit over, which, for me is like a record. Ken, I think you did probably help me out a little bit by keeping your answers, concise, and I appreciate that because I can be long-winded with my questions. Before we get out of here, is there anything that you want to, plug to let people know, like kind of where they can get your stuff? I mean, I assume at this point, anybody who's watching this or listening to this on our podcast feed probably know about kenpom.com, but where can they read your other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, your introduction was great. And right now I'm pretty much just writing on my Substack. You might see me, have freelance pieces pop up once or twice on other sites a year, but I've pretty much found that my writing just doesn't fit into like typical commercial media. I've been kind of fired from ESPN.com and The Athletic, so pretty good track record there. So yeah, I mean, Substack is where I write, and so people are interested in that. They can just sign up it's totally free. They can sign up for emails or just read me over there, and they'll be hopefully interested in some stuff. I know I hit on Mizzou a few times last year with their, amazing ability to play competitive games in the SEC, but never quite get over the hump. So hopefully it'll be positive eyes regarding the Tigers.
It was really impressive, for a team to essentially accomplish 0 wins, but still remain competitive. And I want to say it's 19 SEC games, and I want to say they were competitive in all but 2 or maybe 3 that ended up kind of getting away earlier. I think they got blown up by Auburn, but everybody else struggled to put them away. And does the algorithm like the Tigers a little bit more this year than what we saw last year?
Yeah, I mean, it likes their transfer class, and obviously it expects improvement over last year. I'm curious to see how things play out. I mean, it's I don't want to set expectations too high, but it definitely sees them as a much more competent team this year.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I think there's a lot of quiet confidence around the program, and certainly for us numbers crunchers that are paying this close attention to them, I think we're all pretty optimistic that they're at the very least they're going to be a competitive team, and the SEC, as we know, is a deep league with probably 10 or 11 teams that are looking at making the NCAA tournament. So who knows? Ken, thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate your time. It was insightful, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great, Sam. I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
And I'd like to thank Mr. Ken Pomeroy again. Make sure that you head on over to substack.com/@KenPom. You can find his writings there. Hit subscribe. He'll send you an email with with his thoughts when the blog post hits. Really easy to get to. It's free, also, which is great. KenPom.com is the site where you can see all the analytics. It's one of the best values in college basketball. It's under $25 for an annual subscription. So I would highly recommend that. And again, the follow on Twitter is free as well. So make sure you kind of do all those things. Check out Ken and all of his information. And then as for us, that's it. So if you like what you heard today, make sure that you're subscribed to our podcast feed. You can do so with Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can always watch us on YouTube. If you are looking for a new venture, please head over to rockm.plus. It's our exciting new subscription service that we're working from an extension of RockM Radio and RockM Nation. Just $5 a month. You get access to live podcasts, subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletter, all that and more. There's also an ad-free podcast feed if that's kind of your thing. If you're like me, you don't like ads. So check that out. And so that's it. That's all we've got. I will be back next time, probably some point this upcoming week, with one of the Mats, and we'll talk Mizzou. We'll get back into what to expect this upcoming season. And then it is September 26th right now. That means that we are practice has already started, and we are just days away from dropping all of our preseason content. That starts next week. So be on the lookout for Monday. All the player previews start hitting. Week after, you'll see the beginning of the SEC previews. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and I'll be back.